This is apparently gonna be a hot take, but God forbid you say any flaws about Christopher Nolan, people just have a fucking panic attack, but Damon. This is me before seeing Oppenheimer, and this is me after. I'm gonna try something a little different where I'm gonna talk about what I'm predicting the movie's gonna do or what I'm hoping it will accomplish, and then tell you how it is. I think they're going to use black and white and color the same way that Better Call Saul did, and while they're obviously not the first ones to do it, I'm kind of hoping that we see more of a style like this in the future, because it's a nice role reversal of the usual switch from black and white to color cliche, where the past is shown to be much more bright, colorful, and I don't know, just having this more enthusiastic outlook on the past compared to the way most people look at the present nowadays, as bleak as black and white, oddly enough. So I was close. The majority of color segments actually do take place before and during the Manhattan Project and black and white afterwards, but without spoiling anything, the color and black and white are actually two differing perspectives on who Oppenheimer was as a person, which I think is still a pretty unique way of storytelling, and something that, like I said before, I'd love to see color and black and white contrasted like this in the future. Beyond that, I'm expecting the same handheld camera work that makes absolutely zero sense, especially considering you're carrying gigantic 60mm IMAX cameras. Like, do you not care about insurance of breaking the camera or the cameraman's shoulder? I've always avoided saying this because, God forbid you say any flaws about Christopher Nolan, people just have a fucking panic attack, but I've always found his camera work to be kind of bland. For everyone who says that his movies are visual spectacles, and in many respects some of them are, he films a lot of sequences that should be very crucial in the most generic shot, reverse shot. And maybe here and there there's an over-the-shoulder shot to make you feel like you're actually spying on the characters. And that's really about it, where the practical sets and effects are, to be honest, the only remarkable thing about the visuals half the time. And I gotta say, if you're gonna film the majority of your movie on 70mm and IMAX, show, don't tell. Use a lot of close-ups for crucial events. Don't film everything in a boring medium shot. I mean, look at a guy like Tarantino. His movies are visual spectacles. Practical sets and effects, no CGI. But he at least brings a style by using the camera to tell a story. Whether it be 360 shots, or trunk shots, or two shots. Literally anything that stands out from just some boring medium. And because the majority of Nolan's camera work is handheld, the realism actually distracts more from what's supposed to be beautiful about that image. 90% of the effects to be practical as always. I can only imagine what the nuclear explosions are going to look like. I haven't looked into how you could recreate one without CGI, but I mean, lately we've gotten so used to seeing CGI stunts and effects that if they're creative, look cool, but when you see a stunt, something explode or get destroyed on screen that you know for a fact was real, there's just nothing quite like it anymore. That's the reason Mission Impossible is gaining a lot of people's faith in cinema again. Like, when you see people driving cars through actual walls, knocking over motorcycles, and the fact that the actors are the ones actually driving the cars, there's just... It's such an adrenaline rush. There's nothing like it anymore. Forgot to mention that he tells the story in a non-linear fashion. It's actually been a movie or two since he's done that. My favorite parts of Oppenheimer are when he's explaining or imagining the laws of physics that apply to his experiments, and he can literally visualize all the atoms, molecules, and explosions that come from his experiments. There's this really great scene of him just throwing these glasses onto the floor, and as they splatter all over the place, he's imagining atoms and molecules going in differing directions, almost as if they were stars in a solar system, and it was breathtaking to look at. They were all bright and vibrant and colorful. Because Nolan claims that no CGI was actually used in this movie, I'm assuming he created these effects kind of like Terrence Malick did with Tree of Life, used a lot of paintings, but the effort really goes to show. Those were the scenes that deserve to be seen on IMAX, and it kind of reminded me of the main character from Wind Rises when he takes a fishbone out of his lunch and he imagines it as the shape of a wing for an airplane that he's building. I love that comparison of characters who find their passions in just about every aspect of their life to the point where it's an obsession. The musical score by a composer whose name I'm not even going to try to butcher, so I'll just put it down here, drives forward the suspense for the majority of crucial scenes, and maybe my favorite technical aspect of this movie was the sound design. It was so intense and chilling that it just made all the seats in the theater shake and vibrate to the point where it felt like you were actually in the locations with these characters. That's the power of what IMAX can do and Dolby Digital Stereo, so thank you very much for that. It goes without saying that Cillian Murphy carries this entire movie on his shoulders, and he rises to the occasion. He's one of the few actors in this movie that completely disappears into the character that he's playing. But even though we know full hand, before we even go to see this movie, that we're watching a main character who, in real life, objectively made the world a more dangerous place to live in a weird way, during the first half of the movie, you're still rooting for him regardless. I do like that the first 20 minutes of the movie is describing his education and how he got obsessed with physics. And I will say this, the reason that you root for him even when he's creating a weapon of mass destruction is that deep down, when he is exploring physics, when he's imagining the effects of his experiments, you realize that deep down he just has this unquenchable thirst for knowledge and is just obsessed with learning every subject, not just physics, but literature, linguistics, philosophy, psychoanalysis, just about anything that he can get his hands on. And that love for learning is just so infectious, which is why once he sees the aftermath of his invention and realizes just how catastrophic it can be, you can genuinely see in his eyes that he is remorseful immediately for his actions, and you actually do sympathize him when he spends the rest of his life doing whatever he can to try and undo those actions. And out of all the side characters that he interacts with in this movie, the one relationship that I felt the strongest bond with was with Matt Damon. The two of them had this almost sibling-like relationship where the two of them are roasting and beating each other down every single time they disagree, and then silently look at each other and just nod once they realize that they are on top of everything. It was simultaneously hilarious and dramatic, and it was the relationship that you actually saw the most of with just about every aspect of his life and every person within his life that he comes into contact with, because that's the other thing, this movie has a ridiculously huge cast. Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, Josh Hartnett, Casey Affleck, Rami Malek, Kenneth Branagh, Benny Safdie, Gustav Skarsgård. Wait, how many fucking Skarsgårds are there? Bernard, Matthew Modine, David Dastmalchian, I think, Jack Quaid, Josh. Sorry, buddy. Olivia Thirlby, where the fuck has she been since Dredd? Dane DeHaan, because people still think that he's a good actor, I guess. Aldrin Onrenreich? I don't know. Jason Clarke, Tony Goldwyn, Alex Wolff, this annoying douche, and Gary Oldman. Are all in this damn movie. And for such a huge A-list cast of actors who are taking a huge salary cut just to work on a Nolan movie, I'm, at the very least, optimistic that the majority of these guys being 5-minute extended cameos can still add some presence and serve the story. They serve the story, but for the most part, that's all they're there for. Olivia Thirlby, Jack Quaid, Alex Wolff, surprisingly Josh Peck, among many, many other actors, are given virtually nothing to do in this movie. It's almost like they auditioned and signed on to this movie just to either get out of their house during the pandemic or to put it on their resume that they were in a Christopher Nolan movie, because that will serve them in the long run. Rami Malek has 2 scenes where for a minute each he's standing in the background doing absolutely nothing, and then 2 hours later he comes back, actually says something, and all of a sudden becomes a crucial aspect of the plot, even though, again, it's literally only 1 scene. And I can't even remember that guy's name. This is apparently gonna be a hot take, but I feel really bad for Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh as the 2 lovers of Robert Oppenheimer, because, in my opinion, they were so thinly written that no matter how hard these 2 ladies tried, and believe me, they went for it as hard as they could, but that was also another problem for me. They both had this very strange melodramatic line delivery that I guess was supposed to be how women spoke in the 40s and 50s, and I don't know, it just felt more theatrical and realistic, but the writing for these women, in my opinion, and I'm not one to make judgments about how men write women or women write men, although women writing men these days has become a whole other issue in and of itself, that I have absolutely no idea how these relationships work. I don't know why Oppenheimer fell in love with either one of these two. With Florence Pugh especially, I don't even know what went wrong. Her scenes are so short. She, between her and Blunt, appears and disappears the most infrequently, and to be honest, her relationship could have been cut out and it would have served... It wouldn't have changed a damn thing. Towards the end of the movie, Emily Blunt does become a lot more prominent, and there's this courtroom scene where she actually does get in a couple good one-liners, but, and I'll get into this later, by that point in the movie, I kind of checked out, and it just seemed kind of redundant and too little too late for me. In my opinion, the only side actor who really has a thinly written character, but his performance elevates the material, was Benny Safdie as this one physicist who is always at odds with Oppenheimer and is a complete pain in the ass to his entire team, but because he objectively is one of, if not the smartest people that they have to keep him no matter what, even if he doesn't want to stay there. And I'm kind of conflicted on how Robert Downey Jr.'s character was portrayed. I don't have a problem with him in particular. This is easily some of the best work that he has done in years, and there isn't an ounce, in my opinion, of Tony Stark. You don't get the fast-talking, smart-ass wise man who's just constantly quippy and always gets his way. He's much more methodical, cold, calculating, and with a very vengeful attitude towards Oppenheimer. He's not the one-dimensional bureaucrat who's just obsessed with power or just sees his way as the only way. He actually has this personal vendetta against Oppenheimer where he feels that he's been unjustly wronged by Oppenheimer and can justify in his head just about anything that he's doing the right thing. But the problem is, once they reveal his actual motivation and why he hates Oppenheimer in the first place, not only did it become a little too complicated when it was a courtroom drama by that point and it added like plot twist to plot twist, but when you get to the nitty-gritty as to why he hates Oppenheimer in the first place, it, in my opinion, was the same thing as why the queen from Snow White hated Snow White. It just seems so simplistic and petty that I just couldn't take him seriously anymore. Okay, so since this is a 3-hour movie, I'm going to assume that they take as much time as possible to detail every single event that went into building and testing this bomb, whether it be building the test towns, hiring every physicist and why, and not just detailing the political repercussions of Oppenheimer's actions, but also just showing how his family, his wife especially, feel about him now that he's devoted so much time away from them in order to build something so dangerous and life-threatening. But I'm also hoping that it has the same fast-paced intensity as the trailers do, where they have to build this bomb quickly, safely, and efficiently before the Nazis or the Soviets do. Okay, so arguably the best and worst part about this movie is that it is excruciatingly detailed. This movie is divided into 3 chapters, before, during, and after the Manhattan Project. And because it is a 3-hour movie that is extremely fast-paced, nearly every line of dialogue, in Nolan's mind anyways, has to be exposition in order to move the story forward and to outline every little detail as much as possible. Now, I will say, during the first act of the movie, and maybe even the first half for all I know, whenever characters are explaining things about themselves, 2 things happen. When the Manhattan Project is aligned and physicists are bouncing ideas off of one another, even though you have absolutely no idea what they're saying, it's the passion, the timing, and line delivery of these actors that makes you feel the same level of passion towards physics or the intensity and speed that they need to accomplish in building this bomb before the Nazis do. Or during the later half of the movie when people are just discussing and debating what it means to be a communist and the potential national security threat that it is, characters are outlining their philosophical and political values as if they've never had the opportunity to say them before and feel as if they've had a weight lifted off their shoulders, or with so much conviction and integrity because so many of them have had to fight for their right to free speech and to prove that even though they have similar ideas with the enemy, they're not the enemy. Little did they know that the tables would be turned decades later, and people still pretend like that's not the case. It wasn't until the third act of this movie when all of a sudden it turns into a courtroom drama where I started losing patience with just how long this movie is. There were so many moments where I thought we were nearing the end, and then it just goes on for another 20 minutes, where we see drawn-out, repetitive courtroom scenes of characters giving testimony, characters who were introduced so abruptly towards the beginning, and then for an hour or so disappear, and then all of a sudden they come back in, and they're supposed to be so thematic and crucial, even though I don't remember their names. I don't remember what job they had working for Oppenheimer. I just know who's the famous celebrity that may have won an Oscar or an Emmy playing that character. And I guess that's what's supposed to make these characters complex, but it really doesn't. It felt more like a distraction. I'm just sitting there going, oh, hey, Josh Peck is in a Christopher Nolan movie. Okay, bye, see you for another hour. And he gets like 1 or 2 minutes with Oppenheimer on screen. The majority of them do. Hell, Robert Downey Jr. and Cillian Murphy spend more time talking about how much they hate each other as opposed to actually interacting and hating each other. That's not a good way for a hero and a villain to be set up, by them just sitting in a room without each other's presence. It just felt like such a buzzkill. As much as I enjoy the first 2/3 as opposed to the actual climax, in my opinion, this movie would have been much more cohesive and better paced if it started with Oppenheimer being hired to build the atomic bomb and then ended with the security clearance being revoked. I felt like more of the Manhattan Project characters can actually interact with Cillian Murphy, therefore they would get much more screen time and depth. The villain would actually have time to build up this sinister presence. When it comes to the remorseful actions of Hiroshima, you can actually show what happened to the citizens of Japan, which they don't. They just show the actors staring at the slides off screen. This is apparently Nolan's first R-rated movie since Insomnia, and yet it feels so neutered. I would say that I'd have to see this movie again to get a second opinion, but I did technically watch half of this movie for an hour and a half, and then once the crowd that I was with, who were talking, texting, looking up Wikipedia articles of Oppenheimer during Oppenheimer, long story short, I got fed up. I left. I did what I should have done, which was go to the theater by my house, and things were so much better because the Ninja Turtles told everyone to turn their phones off, be quiet, be respectful, and enjoy the movie. And yeah, that's really all I got to add to it. I mean, Oppenheimer is incredibly well acted. For the majority of the time, the visuals are worth seeing on an IMAX screen. But if you find Nolan slightly overrated or you're starting to get tired of his work, this isn't going to reinvigorate you by any means. And a lot of the problems that you may have had will probably just get amplified, because it still has a lot of self-important writing from thinly underdeveloped characters. And I don't really know where to end the review on this. All I can really say is that I grew up with a lot of YouTube critics who considered Christopher Nolan to be the next Spielberg. And then I discovered the Nostalgia Critic, and he offered an out-of-the-box, possibly hot take opinion that when you think about it for more than 5 minutes, it actually does start to make sense. And it became a lot more liberating to know that if you disagree with your favorite critics, it's not going to be the end of the world.